Good evening and welcome to the Development Management Committee. I am Councillor Peter Gregg, the Chairman of the committee. Before we start the meeting, may I ask the Development Management Committee members present who are seated in the chamber in the front row to introduce themselves, stating your name only, please. Starting on the left.
Councillor John Anderson.
Councillor Alan Acott.
Councillor Alan Taylor.
Councillor Barton Brown.
Councillor Bowker.
Councillor Andrew Thornton.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
Councillor Chas Mumford.
And Councillor Tom Skip.
May I now ask the officers present to introduce themselves again, starting on my left, please.
Keith Zammit, I'm a planning officer.
Stephen Garner, planning manager.
Cheryl Salmon, and I'll be taking the minutes this evening.
Jason Bishop, legal advisor to the committee.
Are there any apologies for absence?
Chairman, I've received apologies from Councillor Riley, and he has appointed Councillor Andrew Thornton as his substitute member.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members' interests?
Chairman.
Councillor Anderson?
Chairman, I requested some time ago that this meeting be put back to 7:30, which hasn't happened. Disappointed it hasn't happened.
Councillor Anderson,
trying
can
to
I
get
stop
here,
you there, please?
Trying to get
this
here
is not relevant
difficult.
to this meeting.
It is relevant.
No.
I made a request and it hasn't been responded to. Thank you.
Councillor Acott.
Thank you, Chairman. Item number 3, the Canvey Island Dutch Cottage. I'm not involved in the Dutch cottage itself, but I'm one of the volunteers who do the garden around the Dutch cottage. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are the minutes for the Development Management Committee meeting held on the 6th of December 2022 agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you. There is one public speaker this evening, Mr. Carpenter, under item 5.
5-1.
Sorry, so 5-1. Items deposited are the plans. Item 1, Hobson's and Sons Limited, Kenneth Road, Thundersley, which is Cedar Hall ward. I will now hand over to the planning officer to present this item. Would you like to present this item, please, Keith?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening. Right, so we granted planning permission at Hobson and Sons. We came to the conclusion it was early last year, I think, didn't we, in the end? Before the last elections, anyway. Here's where the site is. If I get my fancy red dot, corner of Kenneth Road and Kiln Road, London Road. That's showing the former building, which has now been demolished. I've got aerial photograph for you there. Again, showing the old flat roof factory premises, which have now gone. And the site's currently hoarded off. So, just as a little refresher, we approved a layout like this. So that's the main A13, that's the Kenneth Road side. And it was sort of an L-shaped building, designed to turn the corner. Now, if I flick over to what's being proposed now, I'll tell you what they're doing is 2 additional flats have been proposed. So we granted planning permission for 30, and this proposal's for 32. But what they've done, they've had to lose one from the ground floor and then put 3 in the roof. So that's how we get 2 extra. Now, you see this little bit that pokes out here into the car park? That contains the bin store and the cycle store. So this is the old scheme we're looking at. Now, forward to the new scheme, that bit that's poking out there with the bin store and cycle store goes. Now that's to get 2 more parking spaces in for the extra flats. Now those cycle and bin stores, they've actually moved into the building, which is here. But of course that has meant space for 1 flat has gone from the ground floor. So go forward and look at the top floor layout. I know it's more than a little difficult to see because of the size, but these are where 3 flats have been accommodated in the roof. So you've got 1 over here and then 1 here and another over here. So they've not really done anything to the exterior appearance much. If I move on. So the top one is the old approved scheme. The bottom one's the new one. Now this is the Kenneth Road frontage. So if you can see at the bottom, these 3 little dormers that I've ringed in red, that's the only external change as far as you'd see if you were looking at Kenneth Road. Moving on, the Kiln Road, A13 elevation, there's 5 additional windows at the top level in the roof. But if you compare that to the old approved one, which is the top image, hopefully you can see that highlights the change between the 2. So ignore those dashed lines. That's showing much earlier schemes that have, fallen by the wayside. It's just what you see here compared to the bottom image. So just to summarise that, let's just go back. So this is the ground floor where the car park is being expanded. So additional car parking was able to be accommodated. So 2 more spaces. And then you've got that accommodation going up into the roof there. And that results in these additional windows at roof level that you can see. So no, other than that, no changes to the external envelope of the building, if you like. And we've got a recommendation of approval for you, which begins on page 4 and runs on to about page 9. We've got quite a few conditions there. Conditions pretty much unchanged from the scheme we had last time, I'll point out. I think that's probably about all I've got to say on that one, I think, Chairman. For the time being, of course, I'll come back in due course if needed, but I think back to you for now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Carpenter, would you like to make your statement, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members, for
You've got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I've really got very little to add to Mr. Zammett's report, but I just wanted to confirm in person.
Would you like to stand up, please?
Of course, yeah.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to confirm in person, really, our position on the planning officer's stated issues in raising the number of flats from 30 to 32 within the same envelope of the previously approved schemes, Mr. Zammett said. The main issues are referenced in the planning officer's report on pages 3 and 4, just end of page 3, going into page 4. So they are, and this is me confirming our position on this, firstly to confirm an associated increase in the number of car parking spaces that Mr. Zammett explained and how we'd got to that and achieved that on the ground floor. We have agreed to increase all the contributions for healthcare, education, library and recreational disturbance, all in accordance with the requests from the NHS, Essex County Council and the planning officer, and they will be incorporated into the Section 106 agreement in the normal way. And we've agreed to increase the provision of affordable housing to maintain the provision at the same level as previously approved. So in fact, although there's an increase of 2 units, one of those 2 units is another affordable home. So I say I really wanted to say that in person, just to explain that we're agreeable to all of those matters, and little else to add. And I hope members you can grant planning permission for this today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Please note this is a member's opportunity to seek clarification from the planning office or on any matters they are unclear of regarding the application. But members should refrain from making statements about their views on the proposal. These should be expressed in the debate section of the meeting. Are there any questions? Councillor Barton.
My main question is pertaining to the oak tree that is on the Kenneth Road, forefront of the building. I believe originally this was going to be retained. Correct me if I'm wrong, but looking at the tree line now and the picture of the vegetation and the trees they're looking at, that tree is to be removed. Could you confirm that I'm correct in that, please?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The applicant tells me that it's their intention to retain the tree. I believe last time I passed the site, it had a bit of reduction work done on the site that was overhanging the development site to accommodate the building. To me, that sort of reinforces the fact that the assertion that they're going to keep the tree, because why would they do that if they're going to take the tree down? There's nothing that leads me to conclude the tree is due to be removed. The landscaping schemes that we've seen in relation to the, that we've had details of, that they show the tree being retained. Well, I don't know if the applicant will say different, but I'm not aware the tree is proposed to be removed.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Skip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. The first one relates to the 2 additional flats. I'm not quite sure if it's listed before, but I can't see it there. How many bedrooms there are on these 2 additional flats? And the second question relates, I believe in the previous application, there was some amenity space on the roof. I'm guessing that's now no longer in the new application.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, the additional flats are 2-bedroom flats. The amenity space question, there is still a roof garden, but it's been able to be retained. The flats are on a bit of the roof that didn't have roof garden on before.
Please, Councillor.
Can you, we were under on the parking on the previous application, according to our standards. Can you give us the comparison of what we were under then and what we're under now, the 2 calculations, please?
Yeah, again, thank you for the question. The old scheme was 30 flats with 30 parking spaces, so like a 1-for-1, if you like, which is...
What should it have been if we used the planning guidance?
Oh, I see what you mean, sorry. Yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to be a sort of a stickler for the parking standards, then the 2-bedroom flats would have each had like 2 spaces, so there would have been a lot more parking, but you couldn't have done that without sort of chopping some of the building off and giving the land over to parking, which, that would have gone against what the government really is pushing us towards, trying to maximise development on brownfield land, if you like. So it might not seem like much on its own, but every additional unit you can get on a brownfield site stops you having to perhaps release a greenfield site. Like incrementally, there can be quite an impact. So that led the council to approve 30 flats with 30 spaces. This proposal is 32 flats with 32 spaces, so continuing that 1-for-1 provision, if you like.
What is our regs here? What is the deficiency now? There was a deficiency then, and what is the deficiency now?
Oh, right. Well, I haven't worked it out on this particular scheme, but it would be like the same as it was last time, basically. So you're providing you're providing additional flats, which are 2-bedroom. So if you wanted to be a real stickler for it, then you would say, well, you should be providing like another 4 parking spaces because they're 2-bedroom flats. Whereas what they're providing is another 2 spaces, which is 1 per flat. So yes, we acknowledge as officers, yeah, there's like a sort of a 50% shortfall, if you like, on that. But for the reasons sort of, I've explained, like maximising a brownfield development site, we don't feel it's a sustainable position to be refusing planning permission based on that lack of parking. So yes, technically there should be twice as much parking for what they're providing, but
The actual
it's not really.
percentage of the deficiency has increased. Now we've got the 2 bedrooms, so
Well,
it was a deficiency last time, and the number now, we've actually got a bigger deficiency.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it,
now.
I suppose. You know, it does make it slightly more short. But our advice is that it's not a strong proposition to be raising an objection on parking grounds, if you like. Particularly having said yes as a council to a scheme of 30 flats, which only had 1 space for each flat, when some of those should have had 2 spaces. Somebody looking to challenge the decision might say, well, why is this being raised as an objection now? It would be an inconsistent approach for the authority to take, I suppose, is what I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mumford, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The transport statement that backs this up, have you got? Can you put that up at all?
Oh, I don't have a copy to display in front of me, I'm afraid.
Okay, because I just wondered if that might have been a little bit helpful here, because it talks about the trip generation and local transport links. So I just wonder, has that been updated to reflect this additional 2 flats, or is it is that transport statement still relying on associated with the previous application?
The submission's been updated, but because we're looking at such a small incremental amount of additional development, the impact of those 2 extra flats is really inconsequential, I suppose, is what we would put forward to you. So I suppose, yeah, every little extra flat you add, of course, there's a cumulative impact, but when you compare what the council has approved to what's being proposed now, it would be quite a stretch to say that 2 additional flats in comparison to that 30 that the developer can build tomorrow if they want really has a material impact, is I suppose the point I'm making.
Thank you, Chairman. Because I think the transport statement actually would indicate, it talks about traffic movement as to what was there before with the commercial unit, and it does actually, I think, reflect this a sort of reduction in traffic movements. So that might be, leading us to suggest that this would be a scheme that could be for approval. That's all I'm suggesting. Thank you.
Councillor Thornton? Can you put your...
On the previous application, the parking was suggested that it was unallocated. Is that still the case?
No change to that arrangement as far as I'm aware.
So it is unallocated, so anybody could park in there, yes?
Well, only people who live on the developments, but yes.
Okay. And the other thing is, since the previous application, have we not had a reduction in the bus services for that area?
If you're talking about the one that used to go through Thundersley Village, yes. I don't believe that would affect this development because it wasn't passing the site, it was going sort of along Hart Road. I don't know, unless anyone can tell me different. I think the services that pass the site still do pass the site.
On the previous application for the one in Canvey, though, it didn't have to be passing. It was they made sure that they had it was refused because it didn't have 2 parking per 2 bedroom because of the buses, but they were down the road to get the buses. It didn't have to be passing there. So is that not a contradiction on what we did there?
So what Canvey scheme are we talking about?
I think it's the one in the minutes, actually.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
it's the one. It's the one in the minutes.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you know a bit more about that one?
Yes, thank you. So I think the difference with this one is the fact that there's actually a bus stop directly outside the site. It's not uncommon for us to say that developments in areas with more sustainable transport links, so where they're closer to links, it might be a couple of minutes walk down the road. However, it's not common for us to rely on residential units like that, on transport links like that, which is why it's a bit of a different situation. The one in the application in the minutes, it's significantly further from transport links like bus stops, whereas this site in question, I think there's two. I think there's a bus stop on Kenneth Road itself, and there's a bus stop on Kiln Road itself, which is served by a number of different bus routes.
Finally, at the previous application hearing for this, it was asked whether or not we had looked retrospectively at other decisions that we had made where we had reduced the parking from the parking standards and the knock-on effects, because I think I mentioned as well that once it's passed, it's not planning's problem, it moves on to enforcement. And that's when the residents are the ones who are suffering with any overspill parking. So between then and now, has there been any retrospective looking at the decisions that we've made to see whether or not there is any enforcement and parking issues?
As we always do, we've been monitoring. We keep an eye on appeal decisions that come through in the borough to see how we're supported on our decision making. So one aspect of us monitoring the decisions that we make is that we're generally not being supported where we're trying to refuse developments on parking grounds by the planning inspectorate. We do also try and keep an eye on things because it's part of our ongoing decision making that try and keep an eye on decisions to see how they actually, once they're built out, what impact have they done, go out, what was good, what was bad, have we made any mistakes, have we missed anything? It's more of a as and when the sort of development's built, we don't tend to keep a record of it. It's more as officers when we tend to be out on site, we'll go out and happen to drive by and we'll have a discussion about it at the time. We do keep track of them, and just as sort of a point of reference as well, there are a group of Essex officers who are working on a revised parking standards. I don't know when that may come forward, but that might be maybe something that may change ongoing parking standards if and when it comes forward.
Councillor Thornton, please.
Understanding the position that you're taking on the parking within this particular development, in the real world, of course, there are many people who will have two vehicles because they have a work vehicle that maybe they have to bring home, as well as a private vehicle. Plus, of course, I assume that these people at some point in time will have visitors, family and friends that will come along. How do you anticipate that the deal with the overflow will be dealt with?
Thank you for the question. Where a flat only has one parking space available, that would be something that a prospective purchaser would take into account when they're looking to buy it. So whilst, yes, some families or some couples might have a car each, there may well be people who only have the one or don't run a vehicle. So yes, they could potentially park in surrounding streets, but one would also consider when purchasing a flat, how easy is it going to be for me to park? So yes, would somebody with two vehicles buy a flat that only had one parking space? Yes, they could do, but by the same token, there might be people who occupy this development who don't run a car, because it's possible to get about without one. So yeah, I mean, that's something you can put forward as part of the debate, certainly. But notwithstanding officers' advice on the point.
So you're happy that this is not going to cause any issues with any neighbouring roads in terms of overflow being a permanent issue with them?
Well, I can't predict what would happen, but from assessing the development in terms of parking, there isn't a strong reason to refuse planning permission on parking grounds. Whilst everyone will have their own view on parking, it's certainly, even in the time I've been working in planning, parking is probably the most emotive issue that gets raised. Some people will have strong views on it. as officers, we can only give you a dispassionate assessment of the parking situation. As the elected members representing the area, of course, you might have your own views on parking. All I can do is try and advise you as an officer what is likely to be a sustainable reason for refusing development. You know, if you want to do something different, then of course, you know, that's your vote.
Yeah, please.
I think I know the answer to this, but just for clarification, you've shown us on the front elevation there that there are windows which are raised higher than the ones that were previously there. I think I remember from the last meeting that we said that even the above area on the roof, which was potentially a roof garden, I'll say, didn't overlook anyone. Can you again just reassure that this raised elevation is not causing any issue looking over any area that it didn't look over before when it was less of a height?
Yes, the additional windows, they don't cause any issues with the council's design guidance on overlooking. There's no issues there. I mean, you know, you've got a woodland opposite the site, and there's the church sort of site across Kenneth Road. And yes, I mean, the roof garden's been designed so it's like it's behind a wall kind of thing. So you don't, yeah, that in itself isn't an overlooking issue. So hope that helps.
Councillor Thornton.
Finally, there was a consultation response from flooding, I believe, about the drainage, that it hadn't been addressed. Has it been addressed to date?
Yes, a good spot. There's a consultation comment about a holding objection on drainage from, I believe it was Anglian Water, wasn't it? Anyway, what we did last time was there was a condition on drainage, so the developer didn't have to give us a detailed drainage scheme at the application stage. It was deemed appropriate that that could be dealt with, you know, subsequently by when they apply for details of the materials of the building and everything. That would be ironed out at that point. So, yes, whilst there is a consultee comment on drainage, it would be a little unfair on the applicant, so to speak, to then suddenly say, oh, we're not going to let you have a condition on drainage this time, you've got to give us full details now. So we're trying to be pragmatic with it and, you know, say, well, okay, you're only making quite a small change, we're not going to start putting lots of additional requirements on you at this point in time. So, yeah, officers don't see that there's a reason to depart from our previous approach, which is to grant planning permission with a condition on drainage, because it's a technical matter. It's not central to consideration of the case in this instance. I mean, whilst flood risk is very central to consideration of some other cases, in this instance it's more a peripheral one. The main arguments are more about, you know, parking and that sort of thing.
So what does a holding condition mean? What is it that the Anglian Water have put on?
It's like they're saying, we don't object in principle, but we just want a little bit more information. Well, we will give them that information, but we don't feel it's something we've got to insist that the applicant produces at this point in time. It's quite normal for developers to want to sort of get a planning permission in the bag and then spend more money on the details rather than committing all that money on drainage specialists when they don't know that they're going to get the planning permission. So in an ideal world, we would front load the process, the developer would give us everything we need, and there'd be no conditions on planning permission apart from the odd obscure glazed window. But in the real world, we don't get everything up front with the application. There's always technical matters that need to be ironed out, particularly with a bigger development.
So just for clarification, that was the situation on the previous application. We've now got an increase in the usage and the facility that's being built there, but we still haven't addressed the holding application. Is that correct?
Yes, so what it means is, even though they've issued that holding objection, it's important to consider the entire of the site is already hard surfaced. They're not changing that as a result of this. In fact, there may be a slight benefit to the reducing the hard surfacing. But what we are is we're confident that through condition, they cannot build the development until they have provided the details. And we're confident that through the condition, they can provide all the details and they can build the drainage scheme to prevent any harm and overcome the holding objection, which is why we've not made a recommendation that, or we've required the information up front, because it's quite a sort of run-of-the-mill information and drainage scheme that they'd need to produce to overcome the holding objection, which is why we've decided, along with the previous application, to deal with it by submission of details in a condition.
Could I also have an explanation on the increase in the contributions, the 106 contributions that's been made, the percentages, how that works, please?
Thanks, yes. So just looking at the agenda, NHS... Oh, yes, yeah, it also appears on page 4. So they do go up. So I suppose we start with healthcare. That's for the doctor's surgery. So that was 11,270, and that goes up to 15,700. And Essex Way surgery was the doctor's surgery that was identified as being the appropriate one to deliver some improvements at. Libraries goes up Hadley Library. Oh, that was quite a low one, yeah. 2,334 for the Hadley Library, and that goes up to 2,489. The school one does go up quite a bit. That's 54,000 to about 82,000. But the number of school places actually goes up quite a bit, because I thought that was quite a big increase, but it's like 3.1 school places in the old scheme, 4.8 school places in the new scheme. So in percentage terms, it's sort of potentially more school pupils that need a place.
So does that mean that each item it's got a different formula for working out what the percentage is? Because they don't add up. You've got one block that's been built extra, sort of one, and yet you've got different percentages according to what sort of it's been applied to. Yeah,
the formulas are county council formulas. They're not ones that we're particularly au fait with. If there's any dispute over the amounts, then the applicant would be sort of discussing that with the county council. Really, it's not something Castle Point Council produces. So yeah, while it can seem the amounts might be going up or down by odd amounts. Like school places, they take the number of bedrooms into consideration that a dwelling has, not just the number of bedrooms. So, yeah, that's why it can seem odd. Yeah.
So it is anticipating that there is going to be children here.
Yeah,
so their families.
Yeah, two bedroom flat would be suitable. Cars. Yeah.
Are there any more questions from anybody? I think we've really covered this, haven't we? Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Ainsley's got a hand up, but she's not a member of the committee. So.
No, I'm sorry, I can't take any questions. Right, the planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission is granted subject to the applicant entering into a Section 106 agreement and conditions. Both are set out in the report before you. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Martin-Brown.
Thank you. The oak tree is a real big concern for the residents. It was a big part of some of the comments that were given in the original application, and even recent times. I know it was pruned back, and again the residents were concerned about the removal of it. I'm confident in the documentation I looked at on our portal earlier that other trees were going to be planted in there and that oak tree removed. I really think we need to make a stipulation in here that that oak tree is retained. I know there's no TPO on the particular tree, but it's been there for many years. I think a lot of the locals feel like it's part of our community, and getting rid of the heritage of our area to have such trees removed. I really feel strongly that we need to look at retention of that tree and ensuring that this tree is retained in the makeup of this building.
Thank you very much. Councillor Skip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have a few points I want to make here about this. I mean, it's a shame there are no records that we keep on the impact of our previous decisions on parking standards, because because there is no records, I can only refer to my own experience and what residents tell me, and there are issues caused by us not keeping to our parking standards. Secondly, I know you mentioned about the bus route doesn't go past this site. I think that's really relevant because the bus route that's now no longer in existence was a major route to the South End Hospital, which has now been lost. So I think that is a big impact on the people living here if we're not going to ask them to rely on their own vehicles. And finally, okay, there is an increase in deficiency in parking. I mean, it was a deficiency in parking on the previous application. This is now worse because we're now 2 more spaces lost. Because if with the increase in 2 spaces, we're still 2 more spaces deficient. So because of all those 3 things, I will find it hard to support this recommendation.
Councillor Barton-Brown.
Also on the parking side of things, those of us who are local know that the roads surrounding this development, Bradley Avenue and Bradley Close, are permit restricted parking hours parking anyway. You've got the main road there and Bread and Cheese Hill, etc. There's been further large developments already on Bread and Cheese Hill, which has caused parking issues for those in surrounding roads also. The parking situation is a huge concern for me for this development. The roads are already overflowing around this neck of the woods with parking, being that the previous shortfall was already there, creating another 4 beds. Yes, I know there's been 2 parking spaces, but if it was already sort of 50% under where it should be anyway, with the restrictions in the local area, this is going to cause anarchy for the residents.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Thornton, please.
I'd just like to back up what you said. I still think that we are going to have some issues with the parking overflow. I think it was very close as to whether we agreed or disagreed with approving the original because of the parking issue. This is pushing the agenda just a little bit too far in terms of that. I'm also a little bit concerned that since then there have been flooding reports that say in general terms that the infrastructure and flooding in this area is not adequate enough. This is at the top of a very large hill, and it is a contributing factor that if we do have any large amounts of water falling in this area, as you quite rightly say, it's an area that doesn't have any real absorption in that area because it's flat area anyway. It doesn't improve that situation anymore, although I wouldn't reject it on that premise because I think this is a more generic area. For me, still the big concern is the parking and the potential for overflow into the surrounding area.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thornton?
I'd like to agree with all colleagues on the parking. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Barton-Brown?
Also, just on the elevation side of things, obviously you've showed the elevation from the Kiln Road and the Kenneth Road site. My concern again would be Bradley Avenue, because that's where the residents are, that's where the houses are. Looking out onto Kiln Road, you're looking at the woods, looking out the other aspect, you've got the church. From the residents' perspective, I know you said there's no windows now on that aspect. Is the roof garden on that aspect? This is a 3-storey building, it's very high. My concern is the residents in Bradley being massively overshadowed by this, and the fact that these new flats are being put in the roof there. I would have liked to have seen an elevation of what this is going to look like to the residents in Bradley.
Thank you very much. Councillor?
Yeah, do you want to let the planning officer respond?
Sorry?
Do you want to let the planning officer respond?
Oh, yeah. All right, you can plan.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, there's a lot of points there. I suppose on your last point, the envelope of the building is not being increased by this proposal, so there's no more overshadowing would be caused, towards neighbouring properties. The developer's been quite quite intuitive in how they've got these additional flats in. Because the physical appearance of the thing essentially is not changing. I suppose on parking, what else can I say to you? they're all valid points, but we've already got permission for 30 flats and this is only 2 more. So I think if permission's refused on parking, we're really going to struggle to put a case forward on that. Don't disagree with the sentiment of it at all, but you can't get away from the fact there's a 30 scheme permission, a 30 unit permission there now. I know you might not have voted in favour of that, but you know that sometimes there's history to a site you can't get away from.
Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, there's going to be an overflow into the surrounding streets. That's definitely going to happen. But the planning officer is telling us if the government, if this went back to government, the government inspector is always pushing for more housing, and it's not thought by our planning officer, as he said tonight, that we could refuse this on planning.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
So to summarise, we've already got planning approval for 30. We've got a ratio of 1 to 1 in terms of parking spaces and flats. That ratio is the same, even though we can argue about percentages. If we reject tonight, quite right in saying that it's going to go ahead anyway. The possibility of, it's all hard standing as it stands, the possibility of some planting will actually improve drainage there, might actually be a promotion thing. And in terms of 2-bedroom flats with 1, I think we've already, I know we're told that there is no such thing as a precedent, but I think we've already granted that. We've already granted that ratio. So that's a provision of the potential buyer, isn't it? If they're buying a 2-bedroom flat and they know up front that there's a 1-space thing, that's going to be a factor for them to consider.
Thank you. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to call a halt to it now because I think you've all had a fair say. I think we've hammered the parking side of things. So, members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please, for those for the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 for approval.
Those against?
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6.
For approval.
Okay.
Against approval.
Are there any abstentions?
No, that's everyone.
Okay. No.
So now, someone needs to put forward an alternative recommendation.
Okay. What do I have to say on that?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, go on.
Chairman, as the recommendation before us has failed, then a member of the committee needs to put forward an alternative recommendation, an alternative motion, and give valid and material reasons for the change of recommendation. That then needs to be seconded by another member of the committee.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose that we refuse this application on the grounds of deficiency in parking spaces in accordance with the Essex County Council parking standards, the loss of the additional bus route, and the fact that we can't say with any confidence about the impact of approving parking without sufficient parking on the impact on historic applications.
Do you ask the planning officer if they wish to comment on the
Would you like to make a comment on that? Because I'm not happy. Not so much.
Okay, so the proposal is that the application be refused on the basis of insufficient parking provision, essentially. So we'll go away and draft a reason that sort of covers your concerns, and then, you know, we'll do the usual.
Okay, so then that needs to be seconded. But just to clarify from the planning officer, if what the member was saying was incorrect, then we couldn't continue. But you're saying that's fine to refuse. Not that it's fine, but that's a legitimate reason, and then therefore we'll get someone to second it. That's just what I'm trying to
as I understand it. Councillor Skip proposes that the application be refused on parking grounds, which is a valid planning consideration. So to that extent, yes, it would be a valid reason for refusal.
Okay, thank you. Could we have a seconder, please?
Second that, Chairman.
Councillor Mumford? That's fine.
Okay, so now we have a motion that's been proposed and seconded, then it's up to the planning officers if they wish to request deferral so they can look into the matter further and bring it back at the next meeting, or whether we carry on to the vote. No? Then Chairman, you'll take a vote on the grounds of, is it about the debate, about the motion?
I was just going to say, can we say anything around the tree, any moving forward, if the application comes back at all in any way, shape or form, can we put any mention in there around the tree and the retention of the oak tree, please?
Well, the application's been refused anyway.
Not yet.
Well,
No?
sorry,
It's not been refused yet.
No.
Well,
Sorry, well, it's for the planning officer's advice, but we are about to take a vote on to refuse it. So, and what an existing planning permission stands as it is, so you can't add to an additional existing plan.
And had the recommendation been carried, then condition 5 covered landscaping, so you would have been able to deal with the tree under that.
Okay.
yeah, but
Do you want to put the motion for refusal?
Yeah.
On the grounds of So the motion that has been proposed and seconded is for refusal of the application on the grounds of insufficient parking provision.
could we have a show of hands for refusal, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for refusal. Those against? Those against refusal?
Me?
Those against refusal in the room? Okay. 1, 2, 3. So that's everybody. There's no abstentions. So the application's refused.
Refused.
That's it.
Okay. Oh dear, he's not very happy. Item 2. Land to the rear of 171 to 217 Link Road, Canvey Island. It's the Winter Gardens ward. I will now hand over to the planning officer to present this item. Please, Keith.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Right. Now, this, again, we've got an application that's for a revision to an approved scheme. So between Link Road and Central Avenue, there used to be some council-owned garages which were rented out to people in the area, although in latter years they fell into a rather sorry state of dereliction, and I believe only one was occupied before they got knocked down. So anyway, so the council owns the land, which is the reason why the application's here before you. That's what was on the site. Flat roof garages, nothing of particular interest. Although you can see in this picture the houses and the existing flats that surround the land. Right. What's been approved is removal of the garages, replacement with small parking area and 3 new houses. So one was here, sort of fronting onto Central Avenue, and 2 were sort of more centrally within the site, as I might say, and sort of located between the existing flats and houses. And it's these 2 houses here which we need to focus on. So we granted planning permission for semi-detached houses in that location. Now, the reason why the applications come back to us is they want to make a change to the front aspects in particular and the entrance arrangements. This is all to do with step-free access. So we approved houses that had some steps up to the front door, and the step-free access was to the rear of the properties. Subsequent to the council granting planning permission, an issue's cropped up where building control have pointed out that actually you need to have step-free access on the principal elevation to the dwellings, unless there's a good reason for not doing it. And design and looking nice, unfortunately, isn't a good reason for doing that. So what we've now got I appreciate this drawing is a little busy because it's got finished floor levels on, but if you can see through that, the dwelling fronts now don't have steps up to the front doors. I've done a slightly larger one, a comparison side by side, which I hope will show the difference a little better. That's that first scheme that had steps up to the front doors. This is what we're being asked to consider now, which you can't really see it because the bricks are the same colour, but there's a very shallow slope going sideways down from the front doors. And the floor level of the properties has actually been reduced a little bit. They were about, the front door, the finished floor levels were about 1/2 metre out of the ground before. It's only like 225 millimetres now. So they've actually brought the thing down a little bit. So that is really the only reason for the application coming before you this evening. Yeah, thank you. It's to vary sort of the particulars and the details of a permission we've already granted. So I hope that the recommendation of approval, which starts on page 12, is one that members will be able to adopt. And I think that's probably all I've got to point out for now, although, of course, I'll come back with any clarifications needed.
Okay. As this application is on Canvey Island, would the Canvey Island Town Council representatives like to say anything? Councillor Sack or Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, the town council didn't actually have a planning meeting on this particular site, so we've got no comments.
All right, thank you. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about this planning application? Councillor Aycott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is about flooding. Over Canvey, there's been quite a lot of new properties being built, and they all appear to have at least 6 steps up to the front door. Now, the way I look at that, it looks as though it's not a very high ramp at the front door. So are the officers content that if there was flooding of Canvey, these properties are not going to be flooded out? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think what you need to bear in mind here is we're in a sort of a backland position because it hasn't got a road frontage. It's got sandwiched between some houses and flats. If we started increasing the finished floor height of development, you'd create quite an overbearing structure in relation to neighbours that are already there. And in any event, it would be impossible to raise the ground floor level to a height where it was above modelled tidal breach levels. It'd be such a high ground floor level, it would be ridiculous. So we don't do it. The way we look at flood risk is you've got a first floor that you would be able to go to. And then as far as the details go, we encourage developers to fit the dwellings out in such a way that if they were flooded, it's not going to cause too much damage. That doing things like putting the boiler in a location where it won't be affected, putting the electrical circuitry at a level where it won't be affected, that kind of thing.
Councillor Mumford, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask basically the same question, really, but lowering this the steps now, does this put these properties at greater risk than otherwise? Bearing in mind, we are flood zone 3.
Yeah, thank you for the question. In terms of a tidal flood risk event, so that's like a seawall breach, I would say no, because the modelled flood depth is something like 2 metres, so there's no way you're going to set a ground floor level that high. In terms of surface water flooding, although the floor level has lowered slightly, it is still 225 millimetres out of the ground. So if there's very heavy rain and you've got a lot of water on the driveway, you've still got a defence against it. It's not going to run straight into their property. Does that help?
That's right, got.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask the officer Over the last couple of years, has your advice to developers changed? Because I say a lot of the new properties which have been built and people are now in have got at least 6 steps high. And now you're saying that that's not necessary. And so that's what been a change of thoughts of the planning department. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you for the question. It has changed, you're right. When I first came to this authority, sort of back in the noughties, the Environment Agency sort of were blanketly objecting to any new properties on the island, and no new properties were being built at all. We had discussions with them, and they eventually sort of, relaxed their position slightly, and we did start approving new dwellings. But the attempt was being made to jack the floor levels up, which is why you will see some dwellings around. I mean, the ones that spring to mind, there's some on Westman Road, I think, where they're like a metre out of the grounds. They look a little bit odd in relation to what's there already, but yeah, that's how those came to be there. Now we've moved into the position of saying, well, it's a bit unrealistic to expect the ground floor to be so high that you could be above any flood level, but we make sure they've got like a first floor or somewhere they can go to where they're not going to be at risk of floodwater. So yes, it's a good spot. Yes, the council's approach to this has changed. We're led by the Environment Agency primarily, but yeah, it has changed over the years. You're quite right.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at a reason that's been given here for the construction of these houses, and it goes on to say, although the proposed drainage is acceptable in principle, insufficient details were submitted to allow full consideration. This sounds like familiar, which was mentioned in one of the previous items. What does this mean? Insufficient details were submitted. What does that mean? Number 2, there's going to be electric chargers put in beside these houses. Who maintains the charges? If anything goes wrong with them, who maintains them? And the same for the solar panels that's been put in. Who maintains these panels, please? Thank you.
We will, because they're going to be new council houses. Yeah. And what was the first bit? Oh, about insufficient information. Condition 3, was it, Councillor Anderson? Yeah, surface water drainage. Yeah, a bit like, I suppose, similar to the previous application, because it's a technical matter and the site's hard surfaced at the moment. The precise drainage details can be ironed out. Although we did actually see some drainage details with the original scheme, and it was going to be to the existing surface water sewer, which is our standard practice at the moment. So, yeah, hopefully that gives you some comfort.
Just to follow up to that, there's not going to be any underwater tanks, saving retention tanks in that site, I guess.
As I recall, the storage was all within the pipework. They tend to provide pipes that are large enough to provide capacity. But yeah, there will be some storage. It will be in some form, yeah.
Councillor Thornton, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can't quite work it out from the front elevation, so maybe you can just help me with some idea of the dimensions on this. If I'm reading it rightly, on the left-hand side, you've got, what, 2 or 3 steps there, which were previously the situation? I can't really work it out from the picture. And if so, could you tell me how high the ramp goes by the time it hits the front door and the depth of it, so that I can get some idea of whether there's any concerns about icing and being able to step up there? If it was iced over that slope, how much of a health and safety issue is there? Could people just step up if they're not in requirement of anything like a wheelchair? Would they be able to just step up over the top, or do they have to use the ramp? And how deep would that ramp be to allow for a wheelchair but allow it still to be a step up, if that makes sense to you?
Yes. As far as the heights go, where's that gone? The first one, the floors were like 0.5 metre out of the ground. This time it's 225 millimetres. So that's, yeah, it is lower. I think it looks more like about 4 or 5 steps to me there. The building regs require about at least a 1.2 metre sort of depth of the ramp, so somebody's not like rolling backwards while they're trying to put their key in the door. The ramps, I know it's difficult to see on that drawing, but the slope is actually going down sideways away from it. So there's like a plain old step for, you know, if you just want to walk up the step. But if step-free access is needed, the ramp sort of very gently goes down like that. So does that sort of...
It does. Part of my concern is if it is that a very shallow slope, then there's more likely that water will retain on the slope, which will ice over.
Oh, I
Whereas
see
if
what
it's
you mean.
deeper, then the water's likely to drain off it. But you're likely to be in a situation with a cold snap that by the time you get up in the morning, you've got ice down that, which could be a health and safety issue.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think it's 1 in 12, the slope gradient. So accumulation of water on the ramp was not something that we would worry about.
Councillor Aycock.
Thank you, Chairman. But when the officer said about putting car electric charging points in, do you mean you will be putting the cable in and then the resident of the property will have to put the connection on the cable to fit their car? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, it's all got to be fully operational. So one charging point for each house, like ready to go. Somebody can move in there with an electric car.
But when I haven't got an electric car, I'll read that there are different...
Could you put your microphone on, please?
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I don't possess an electric car, but what I understand is that there are different connections from the end of the cable to the car. So how do you going to know which connection you're going to want? Right, thank you.
Yeah, you're right. There are different connections depending on what type of electric cars there are. However, there are a number of sort of more... I wouldn't say there's a generic standard like everything like maybe USBs are for computers, which are pretty much universal. However, there are a number of certain standards. Tesla have certain standards and other electric vehicle manufacturers have different standards. But a lot of units, electric vehicle charging units, can come with cables that you can have the box on the wall, and then you can get a cable which is the correct cable to plug into your specific car. Quite a lot of electric vehicle manufacturers will supply the car with the specific cable that is needed with the right connection on the end. So some form of either, if the wrong cable is there ready for when whoever is there moves in, it wouldn't be a requirement to rip out the entire electric vehicle charging point and replace it with a brand new one. It would simply be the cable between that could be swapped out, or an adapter for the connector could be purchased.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the planning officer at all? Councillor Taylor.
Parking. I don't see anything about parking up there. You're talking about putting electric chargers in. Where are you going to put them? Where's the cars getting parked? There's no garages there. You've no garages down to build them. They look like basic houses. I thought there was some on Canvey that the ground floor on houses had to be garage type because of the flooding. I might be wrong there, but I'm sure I've seen some about it. But there's nothing there for parking.
The reason Keith's gone a bit sort of brief on that is because this is a variation of conditions application. So what the applicant has done, the council has done, is they've already got the consent to build these houses with a slightly higher ground floor level. They've come in after discussions with building regulations and confirmation that having the ramps around the back wouldn't comply with building regulations. So they've come in with slightly amended plans to lower the ground floor level to be in compliance with current building regulations. As a result, all this application really is for that lowered ground floor level. It's why we've not really gone into detail, Keith's not really gone into detail in his presentation about parking and all the other general considerations we would normally cover on a new dwellings application, because it's all that is different between this application and the previous one is the ground floor level has been reduced by about sort of, I don't know, 12 inches in old money. So that's the difference. However, as you can see on the on here, you've got a number of parking spaces which are provided, which are the same layout as which the committee previously approved. There's 2 parking spaces for each plot, along with a visitor space. And I'm not sure, maybe Keith can tell me, I'm not sure whether there's any, we don't know the location of the proposed electric vehicle charging points. However, they would be within the vicinity of the parking spaces in order to enable them to function. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Okay. Right, okay. The planning officer's recommendation is that this application be approved subject to the conditions as set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I've moved the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Okay.
Oh. It's on my ward. All right, the council houses, we don't normally build council houses here. I think this will be 7 in the last 7 years. So as far as I'm concerned, I approve the recommendation that we go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Councillor.
I reiterate what the gentleman has just said.
All right, toss a coin. Who's going first?
I was going to say the same.
Okay.
It's good to see some council houses being built, also accessible council houses with ramps. So for me, it's a thumbs up. It's good to see that we're doing the right thing and looking after social housing needs.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Thornton?
I have nothing more to add. If it reassures you, when we did the original one, we were quite robust about talking about parking. So that was covered when the original application came forward.
So can we take it that you're all happy with it then? Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please, for the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I believe that's unanimous, Chairman.
I would have said that.
Sorry.
That's all right. And there's no abstentions either.
No.
Right. The application is approved. Okay. Item 3, the Dutch Cottage. Again, it's on Canvey Island and it's in Westward. I will now hand over to the planning officer to present this item.
What about the town council?
Oh, sorry. What about town council?
Thank you, Chairman. I say we never had a meeting on this because there was no point at all. Just replacement of the door. So we've got no comments.
See, told you. Nice done. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I will now hand over to the planning officer again.
Thank you very much. Right. So, here we are, west side of Canvey Road, on its little service road there. This is what it's looking like at the moment, in a bit of a sorry state with the door boarded up. The proposal is to replace the door, timber door, same colour scheme as what's there now, sort of a stable door type arrangement. I'm told that depicts. So yeah, we just hope that the Dutch cottage can be restored and cheered up a bit from how it is at the moment. Yeah, there it is. Not really sure what else I can add to you on there. They want to replace the door.
Okay. Is that it, Keith?
Yeah, that's it, I'm afraid.
As this application is on Canvey Island, no, I've done that. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Councillor Aycock?
Sorry? No, not involved with the cottage, the garden. We haven't got a door in the garden. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The officer said that you're putting a stable door there, which to my mind is in two pieces. Surely a heavy-duty door, which I think often called a church door, would be more suitable in a building of that design and the strength of it than a stable door. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Keith?
Well, I'm not an expert on doors and joinery. I mean, this application's been put together by the council's property team. Yeah, it's a valid point. Can you got anything to add?
Because it's a listed building, we have to be very careful with the fabric. I mean, ideally, we wouldn't want to lose the existing door because it's part of the historic fabric. Luckily, the sort of metalwork and ironmongery from the current original door is going to be reused on this door. However, as part of the listed building consent, it's been designed to pretty much be a replica of the existing door prior to it being damaged, so that once it's put in, painted the same colour, as you walk by, people wouldn't notice the difference, so that it maintains the same external appearance, because unfortunately the existing door is beyond repair. Otherwise, it would have been attempted to have repaired the door to maintain the historic fabric.
Sorry? Yeah. Councillor Taylor, please.
The way you're talking there, you're just going to put that door virtually back where it is, so it'll get broken in again. You want a decent door on there, a church door. Oak wood, solid. Put new ironwork on there. Who's paying for this anyway? The council. Right, well, they've got the money. Get a proper door on there. Steel, proper steel work. No plaster it up with some rubbish.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bogar?
I think Stephen's already addressed that. It's a listed building, so it has to be in keeping with what was there. Has to be as close a facsimile and as close a resemblance to what was there in the style of which it was there. Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, we might have some, dare I say, some CCTV on the lamppost outside, at least as a small deterrent. But we are restricted in what we can and can't do with it. I believe it's grade 1 listed. Grade 2 listed, grade 2, anyway, yeah. But it's listed. So we kind of are where we are, aren't we?
Councillor Thornton, please.
Councillor Bowker has just answered a question I was going to ask what grade it was in terms of that, because that will obviously restrict what you can do in terms of the door. My suggestion, I don't think CCTV we could do that for the obvious reasons, but is there any way that security lighting could be put there that triggers when people are in that area at night to stop or to at least deter people from vandalising it under the cover of darkness?
It's certainly an idea for the future. We couldn't do anything about it as part of this application because all that's being asked for is listed building consent to replace the door. I suppose you could sort of lobby for improvements and a further listed building consent application to be made for, for lighting, but that'll have to be for another day, I'm afraid.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I'm sure there's floodlighting of the cottage on the front fence. There's no big front. Oh, I don't know, about 2 foot diameter or 2 foot square floodlights to light the whole of the building up.
All right, well, that's irrelevant to this meeting, this application. Okay. Are there any other questions for the planning officer? Okay. Right, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please, for approval?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
That's everybody, isn't it? No abstentions?
No abstentions.
Okay, the application is approved. Following the conclusion, that concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you very much for attending and have a safe journey home. Thank you. Good night.